Hello and welcome to the Speakeasy. I'm your barkeeper, Jeff Belanger, and this is the place where it's always okay to drink alone. Together. There's never a cover charge, and of course, I don't card anyone. Everybody's welcome, and I'm glad you're here. If you're watching live right now on Facebook Live, go ahead and share it with your friends so other people can watch and participate. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what you're drinking, because that's the point of the Speakeasy, is we just kind of hang out and have some drinks, have some laughs, talk about life. Now, tonight is going to be out of this world because we'll be discussing extraterrestrial life as well as terrestrial life because it affects us all. UFOs going to be a hot topic, and I'm going to share one of my own encounters when I was a kid that saw these strange lights in the sky. I'm going to tell you all about it. And I had another one when I was an adult with a person that my guest knows very, very well. We'll get into all of it. It's going to be great. So tonight, I'd like to welcome my old buddy. He's a ufologist, an author, an investigative writer, and a producer from New York. Please welcome Peter Robbins. And there you are.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be drinking with you again.
It is. So what are you drinking tonight?
Tonight, Glenmorangie single malt whiskey.
Ooh.
From the great nation of Scotland.
Yes.
Here's to you.
Well, let me get, so I've got Baxter Brewing Company. This is an IPA from the great country of Maine.
Cyberclick.
Yes. Hold on. I got to pour it. Wait, crack that sucker open. And here we go. I've been drinking more than I should because of this quarantine. How about yourself?
No, I haven't been drinking more than I should. I think just the right amount.
Oh, every day, twice a day?
No.
Cheers.
I'm not a really big, oh yeah, baby.
There we go.
To your good health.
To your good health. May we not catch anything going around.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got people drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon, which is just wonderful. And thank you guys for checking in. We'll post as many of your comments as we can. Hello from Virginia. Good to have you here, Midge. And good to have everybody watching. So since the world changed, how has it affected you personally, Peter? You doing okay? Are your people, your friends, and everybody you know okay? What's going on?
I've lost one friend and a couple of others I'm concerned about, but overall, I'm doing great. I mean, I'm really blessed in my situation. I'm self-isolated in my little house in central New York State, beautiful rural area, about half a dozen miles from Ithaca, New York, home of Cornell University. And I'm guessing I probably have enough food in the house if I ate all the time to last me about 3 months, easy.
Good.
And I love to cook, so it's a great escape there too. My concerns are with so many other people, but I'm doing fine, all things considered. Day number 35 of self-isolation with Kat.
Yeah, and so my family's hanging in there too. You asked just before we went on. I'm not leading you to be like, hey, you're supposed to ask about me. You just asked seconds ago, just people didn't know. So yesterday, our governor of Massachusetts announced school year's done. And so, you know, in films, when like they're doing this horror effect where it just goes, right. So I read that, and it looked like it was like I looked at the calendar today, like mid-April, and I just looked at September, and it just looks like as far in the distance as anything could ever look, Peter, like 1,000,000 miles across the desert, and I've got a canteen that's just about out of water.
Is Sophie happy or not so happy about not being in school?
So she's 13 and in 7th grade, and if it ever had to hit a kid, this is the right age because they want to stay inside anyway. They don't want to do anything, and so she's actually fine with it. It's me. Great. I need the help. And the good thing I've got Baxter Brewing Company to help me just a little bit. Okay, so I don't know if I've ever told you this story, Peter. We met at a paranormal conference, I think in Massachusetts, right?
That's right.
And Peter's a UFO guy, and I had a UFO experience. Did I ever tell you this as a kid?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, strap yourself in. Here we go.
Please.
It's May of 1987, and I'm living in Connecticut, and I'm a kid, so obviously my whole family's there. It's about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and my dad was closing the gate behind our house. and he starts screaming bloody murder. Jeff, get outside right now! Get out of here! That's not my dad. My dad's not a scream from outside kind of guy.
Wow.
So I leap out of bed and I race down the stairs, and I run to the back of the house, and I open the door. I'm like, Dad, what's going on? And he said, there's a UFO in the sky right there. I swear to God, come see this. And I'm like, you are so far out of your mind. And I start walking up in my pajamas through the backyard, and I turn around, and there's this huge ring of lights. Now, super important part of the story. It's a very overcast night. There are no stars. It's just solid cloud cover. And this ring of lights is moving so slowly. Is that coronavirus? I'm not a doctor.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, you got it. Can you make it till like 8 o'clock? Can you just?
Probably.
Okay, good. So this ring of lights is moving so slow. It's under the cloud cover. So my point is, if it's a starry night, you could see if the thing was solid, but you couldn't tell. Making almost no sound, just the slightest hum, and it went right over the house next door. And then we watched this thing for, I'm saying, like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. That's an eternity. Yeah, forever, right? Forever.
That's a lot of time.
Could have run inside and got a camera, but I did not, because I was just like, whoa, right?
Of course.
And then it went over the trees, and it was out of sight. It just beyond where we could see it. And my dad and I were just, holy cow, that was amazing.
Wow.
Next day, front page of the Danbury News Times says over 100 phone calls about this ring of lights. And it's and they said it was a group of Cessna pilots flying from Massachusetts in formation as a prank.
Of course.
So we were both like, oh man,
in a perfect circle.
But so here, this is a crazy thing, Peter. So stay with me. So years later, as I start to get into like weird research, right, as you do, suddenly I come across a photo of a guy took named Randy Edding on the I-84 corridor in May of 1987, an airline pilot who saw the same ring of lights and did have a camera and did take a picture. I just didn't see it till decades later. I'm going to show everybody in just a couple seconds. But I say this. We've all seen about 8 trillion Cessnas fly over our heads throughout our life, right? It's a lawnmower in the sky, right? Like loud. And they have fixed lights, you know, red, right, returning, red and green. Exactly. We all know a Cessna. Like this, you don't have to be an aviation expert to pick out a Cessna or a single engine plane. So I'm going to show you the picture of what the official account is a group of Cessnas flying in a circle. There it is. That's Randy Edding's photo, right? Like, I'm not saying little green men. I'm not saying that's little green men. I am saying that it's not a group of Cessnas.
No, well, if it is, it's the 27 most skilled Cessna pilots in the entire world.
Right,
that's
right.
Good trick. Oh, that's what they said about the Phoenix lights too.
Well, right. So it's one of those things where I remember at the time being so bummed, like, oh, Cessna's flying a prank. My dad was a pilot in Vietnam. Like he's been around airplanes, and he's like, yeah. Cessnas don't make. And they said, well, they used a real thick oil mixture and whatever. But it was one of those moments, right, where you're just like, whoa. Yeah. And where we lived in Connecticut, I mean, this is not far from New York City. This is a very populated area. And of course, front page news, everybody saw it. And wow, right? Like, and then to get it validated all those years later was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Had you had any interest as an adolescent about the subject of UFOs before that? Or if so, was it pronounced or just, So I owe some of my paranormal career to my dad and I watching In Search Of, Amazing Stories, later X-Files, on and on. And then one of our favorite movies of all time, my dad and I, in interest of full disclosure, this one, Fire in the Sky. Oh, yeah.
Which will lead to my second UFO story, but I don't want to tell it right now. We'll save it for later. But I want to know, how does a New York City boy like you, so I grew up away from the city where we could see stars. How's a New York City boy get into UFOs?
Well, I was born in New York City in Queens County, I'm very proud to say.
Right.
But at the age of 7, my folks moved my sister Helen and I out to Long Island. And so I grew up and came of age in a lovely village called Rockville Center, about 30 miles east of the city.
Yep. I went to Hofstra. I know right where it is.
There you go.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful place to come of age, especially in the 1960s. And again, Manhattan was 30 miles away. I had the best of both worlds. As a kid, I was about as sophisticated as Leave It to Beaver. It was a more innocent time, and I was the ultimate mega geek. I was short. Well, I still am, actually. Bespectacled. My great passions in life about that time were collecting rocks and bugs and stamps, being a Boy Scout, cooking, which I still love to do. I am lacking the sports gene, which for a lot of guys would be a source of tremendous embarrassment. For me, it's just fine. I fill it in with other things. And one June late morning, my sister Helen and I were goofing around on the front lawn, as kids do. At one of those points, and any of your listeners that grew up in small towns or villages knows what I'm talking about. There's nothing going on. There's nobody out there. There were no other kids playing. There were no cars going by. There's no ice cream truck. No nothing. Clear blue sky, not a cloud, and I caught something out of my right peripheral vision. And I either said Helen or look. I've relived this several times in hypnotic regression to verify the reality with myself. And 5 silvery white disc-shaped objects, actually ellipses, like holding a dinner plate out at arm's length, but tipped, in a very precise V formation, came in at a very high speed and stopped over the neighbor's house, the Parker's house across the street. I don't know how big they were, but if they were small planes or big planes, they were close enough that we could make out regular detailing around the edge of each, which we could only read as windows. They were metallic, not shiny like stainless steel, more like brushed aluminum. And it went on for several minutes, which especially in kid time is beyond forever.
Yeah.
I had really not thought about this. I had intuited the adult world's understanding that they're not real. For me, they were real sometimes on Saturday mornings when I'd go to the fantasy theater with a bunch of my geeky little friends and we'd watch a wonderful couple of B movies. But nothing had prepared me for this. And I went through something right then and there that I've documented with other people hundreds of times, truly hundreds of times over the decades, that I call the checklist reaction. You look up and there it is, or there they are. And your rational mind goes, not blimps, kites, balloons, helicopters, airplanes, flotsam and jetsam, strange-shaped clouds, formations of birds. What am I looking at?
Right.
And it actually was more dramatic in that many years later, when my sister and I first talked about it, because it became a repressed memory of childhood, I couldn't handle it for more than 14 years. When it came up years later, I was a young painter in New York City at the loft in Chinatown. That was my life, being an artist. And the memory returned with a vengeance. I got so upset, I thought I must be going crazy, because how could you ever forget a memory like that?
Right.
Well, all too sadly, many people have repressed memories more often than not from conventional, real human trauma. But when this memory returned, it returned in a way that was undeniable. And once I calmed down, I called my sister. She verified the details. Without my feeding her any lines, I had enough foresight to say, I've remembered something. I'm going to set the scene. And she cut me off mid-sentence, and the rest was history, except that she then told me about fragmented conscious memories she had never lost of what I'd now call a classic UFO-related abduction. And so I became involved, obsessed overnight, which I wasn't pleased about because it really derailed my career as an artist, which was the only thing I had ever wanted to be since I was a kid. And I still have a certain amount of resentment all these years later, but that's how I got involved.
Isn't it funny? Sometimes you choose your career and sometimes your careers choose you. Um, So Allison here wants to look. This is interesting. I've been saving this. Hi from Mid Hudson Valley, New York. Summer of '83 or '84, she experienced a mass sighting of huge chevron-shaped UFOs, and they tried to explain it away. So here we have a witness who remembers all these years later. Do you know much about that? You're nodding your head. I mean,
actually, I do. About?
Yeah,
and Allison was one of hundreds of witnesses who came forward. Probably a modest percentage of people who actually had sightings. This was so well documented that the triangle-shaped UFO sightings of '83 and '84 are a serious part of UFO literature. In fact, Allison, in '83, there was a town meeting held at the local high school, which was packed. I mean, every seat in that auditorium was taken. And I remember seeing Whitley Strieber there, which was doubly interesting in retrospect.
Yeah.
Famous American author of Communion, very important book relative to UFO abduction.
Contact and right.
This was some years though before he published any of those books. He was still kind of a demi Stephen King writer and a damn good one too. It was the day that I met J. Allen Hynek, arguably the most well-known person in UFO studies at that point in history. And one witness after another, regular folks, probably not unlike you or your parents, got up on that stage. I'm a farmer, I'm a librarian, I'm a housewife, I'm an office guy, and I saw, and it was at the beginning of the age of home VCR cameras. There was footage, and it didn't look a lot different than yours did, or triangular. They were two types that they were seeing. So I take you very seriously, Allison.
No, for sure, and I understand that, and I know along the way, it's funny, like us kindred spirits, like you said, we sort of hit it off when we first met because we're both like you take the subject seriously, but not yourself so much.
Absolutely,
right? You can't, right? And sometimes you just go, yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but there's this going on.
That's it.
And I admit it. Yeah, I grew up on a lot of these shows, and I want to bring up a person who I know you knew well, and we lost him just about a year ago. Of course, Stanton Friedman. Yeah, died in May of 2019.
That's right.
And the first time I met him was at a Michigan Paracon, where mainly it was ghostly crowds. I admit it, but Stanton was there, and I'm like, oh my god, right? Like I was like,
best.
And the thing about him, not only did he make ufology so legitimate because of his background and his approach, but
physicist.
But he was one of the most approachable guys ever. He could be in line for dinner, at the bar, going to the bathroom. It didn't matter. He would stop and talk to you like no big deal, whoever you were. I watched him do it over and over, and what a loss.
Yeah. He was 82 or 83 when he passed. He was doing what he loved. But as far as those of us who loved him and admired him and respected him, much too soon. He had a heart attack when he was 80. And being old school, I sent him a note card as opposed to an email. And he sent me a note back, which read, if I'm off its by a word, "Dear Peter, thank you. Doing fine. Both parents lived till 90. Want another 10 years. All the best, Stan." Didn't quite get it, but an inspiration to us all. And like you say, legitimized the study for a lot of people who might not otherwise have come into it or taken it seriously.
I had the opportunity, I think I introduced a panel that he was on at that particular conference. And again, I was trying to convey to people, because there was not a big line to talk to him. And again, not mainly his crowd. This is not his fault. In UFO circles, the line's out the door and down the block. But so I'm saying, like, have you ever watched a UFO documentary? And I mean any of them, ever. He's in it, right?
I was going to say, there was a law for many years.
You're not allowed to make one without. It's like, call Friedman. And then, right?
Going back to the 1970s, I think it's you can find it in the legislation of the Senate.
That's right. Like he was in all of them, and with good reason. I'm not taking anything from him. He was always so level-headed.
Science first.
Yeah, and just what a loss. And so who's the next Stanton Friedman out there? Who do you think we can look to? That's, I mean,
well, it's like saying who's the next Bud Hopkins out there, who we lost in August of 2011.
Right.
Who was a dear friend of mine for 35 years, and I worked for him for about half of that time as his assistant. I don't know if these people are replaceable. There's a whole new generation of people coming up, which I'm very glad to see. It's informed a great deal by media, which it sure wasn't when I started out in the 70s and when Stan started out in the 60s. I don't know if we can even talk in those terms. There are a lot of good people working, and sure. But you don't get another Stanton T. Friedman.
No, and I'm so glad I got to meet him. I didn't know him anywhere near as well as you, because we roll in different circles, but it was great to get to, I think two different times I got to hang out with him a little bit, and that was a thrill for me. I remember, like, this is one of those times, Peter, where like I would grab my phone, and keep in mind, I mean, I'm not trying to brag, but people were asking for my autograph too, right? But like, I'm running in the corner, I'm like, Dad, guess who I just like had lunch with? Stanton Friedman. Like, you're kidding me, right? Like,
that's great, man.
I could have said Elvis. You know what I mean? I'd be like, me and Elvis hanging out. No way. It was amazing.
My dad passed about a year and a half ago. He was tragically snatched away from us at 98 years and 7 months.
Yeah.
He would have been 100 last week.
Oh my gosh.
But he was ready to check out, bless his heart. Took all of this subject very seriously, read the books, was really quite good friends with Richard Dolan, who is doesn't live that far away, and a friend and soul brother and close colleague of mine. Travis Walton came to the house to meet my dad. They had gotten along great. My father was a huge fan of his, but I'd often be sitting right where I am working. I shared a house with my dad until he passed, and he'd call me in. He's watching television, yet one more UFO documentary. Stan's on this, Travis is on this, Rich is on this, Nick's on this. How come you're not on this one? I don't know, Dad. But
can't do them all. I'm not Stanton Friedman. What are you going to do?
I'm so glad you got into this, in a way, sharing it with somebody that you love and respect and admire. It makes it all the more interesting, exciting to have somebody that you come up with in the work. For me, when I started, which again was just basically an outlet of the obsession of what the hell happened to my sister, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know there was such a thing as ufology. I had never read a book. There was no going online. The articles on the subject were almost always tabloid. So it took a while to kind of lock in and find my place in it. And at a certain point, realizing, oh, I guess this is what I'm doing right now.
So we actually have a good question here from Shannon. Wants to know, what's the best way to share? So if you have a sighting, how do you put it on the record? What do you say to that?
Well, you have, I believe it's called the UFO Sighting Center. I may be off on that. In Washington State, you have the largest UFO organization in the world, based here in America, the Mutual UFO Network.
MUFON, sure. Yep.
With affiliates in every state and every region, you can report it to them. You can go online and find type in UFO websites into your browser, and you'll get a zillion hits. Explore them a bit. If there's one that doesn't seem, weird or that you feel comfortable with, you can post it on there. I'm a public person. You can always contact me through my Facebook page or my email address. And many of us are, fairly accessible. There are people in the work who are not so much so, but at least.
Hey, I'm right here, Peter. I can hear you. I can hear you.
Some validation, or at least somebody to hear you out, because for a lot of people, it's still a very isolating experience. And since the United States Air Force, not really, but publicly went out of the UFO reporting business in 1968, people have contacted their police departments, the Air Force, even though, not that they're going to do anything about it. And now we have the Space Force, which I don't think has any interest in the subject either, publicly at least.
And you think they'd get the closest look?
One would think.
I believe the official motto is pew, 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 which is pretty sweet.
It may well be.
They're still working on it. It doesn't fit on the jacket.
Amen.
But no, it's one of those topics that I get it. And we still have to mix with the media, right? And you said it was the Weekly World News that reported these things.
Yeah, and the Inquirer.
And the Inquirer, right? So it starts with like, one of these sensational stories, and that still happens today. However, there are very visible people, like you said, that are taking it seriously and doing their best to document it.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind that those people are, if they are accessible, they're probably getting a lot of emails, and they're trying to decide like where they can put their time, because you can't
That's a
chase
big part of it.
Yeah, and that's I mean, I get that on the ghost side, Peter. Someone will send me an email and be like, "Hey, there's a cold spot in my house. When are you coming over to check it out?" And I just say, "Yeah, I'm probably not. It's I'm I'm sorry, but that's how it goes. That's how it goes sometimes." Okay, so I want you mentioned Travis. We've mentioned him a couple times now. So
Yeah.
Travis Walton. You worked on a documentary project about him, right?
I did.
So, like most of us, I think we probably know the movie Fire in the Sky. I watched that with my dad, and then
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to see Travis speak multiple times now and tell his story. What did you work on with him? What was the project?
It's a documentary, and trying to be as objective as I can, I think it's one of the best all-round UFO-related documentaries ever made. The production values are up there with anything that Ken Burns would make, or that you've seen on PBS.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Travis Walton. It's called Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. And it's feature length, 19 minutes. It's won some dozens of film festival awards at this point. The producer director, Jennifer Stein, Philadelphia-based brilliant filmmaker. I'm very proud that she was a producer on a recent documentary that I did on my own, pretty much. The first time I heard Travis speak was probably about 1990 or so. And like a lot of people, I was kind of in awe. What I saw up on that stage was a guy who was not like you or me. He was not having a good time. He was not terribly comfortable with what he was doing, but he felt it was his responsibility. It's a fine book. It is genuinely self-written. It's certainly a fascinating film, unfortunately, to a degree informed by Hollywood nonsense, but also to a degree very accurate. The documentary corrects a lot of that. And we went on to become friends and then good friends. And some years ago, when he had decided that he wanted to put on his own conference leading up to the 40th anniversary of the event, I had the honor of being asked if I would help him do it. And so we produced a conference in Arizona, not that far from the events in question, on the 39th anniversary, and then on the 40th anniversary, and really got it right. I've been out to that location in the Sitgrave National Forest, and nothing prepares you for how remote it really is. Due to a forest fire probably 20 years ago, which, obviously hasn't grown in fully yet, you can see probably 30 or 40 miles from that spot. Sitgrave National Forest covers parts of 3 states. It's massive. And it brought the point home. I've also made good friends with Mike Rogers. Mike was Travis's best friend at the time, and the illustrator of the book. He's a self-taught artist. Mike is a great guy with a brilliant mind, I think, and very inquisitive, very scientific in his inquiries. But he was the crew chief. He was the guy behind the wheel. He was the guy who hit the gas and took off when that beam of light hit Travis in the chest and threw him 10 or 15 feet. And when he landed, he wasn't moving and there was steam coming off his body. A lot of people have criticized Mike over the years. Travis has always defended him. It really hurt Mike a lot. Travis was the first to say, I would have done the right thing. You could have all been killed for all we knew. I think he is one of the great spokesmen for this subject. He has been all over the world talking about this, and he is as humble and down to earth as he was probably growing up in Snowflake, Arizona, population 5,000.
And the interesting thing about him is that I've seen him now many times because we're sometimes at the same conferences. And one of the things I found, I don't know if you've seen this on your side, Peter, but like when someone has had a profound paranormal experience that maybe even made it into the popular culture through a movie or whatever,
that's right.
Suddenly they feel pressure either without or within. I don't know. It doesn't matter to say, well, oh, and then this happened, right? Like I'm more than just this one experience. And then you start not believing them because like, and then I saw Superman and he flew me to the moon, and you go, oh, so now everything's in question because now you're telling,
you're in it for the money.
Yeah, now you're telling tall tales. Travis has his story's never changed as far as I've seen it.
No, never.
And it's just the one, right? And which is a lifetime worth of experience anyway.
Exactly.
But it's the
also,
one time.
For what it's worth, one of the things that makes Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, stand out among UFO documentaries is first, it's mega focused on one case and the individual. Yep. Second, it is filled with archival footage. It balances the mythology, the allegations with the science, with FBI background work on him, with the realities of what it would be like for all of those witnesses to fake convincing results of voice stress analysis, lie detector work. It presents the science behind the allegations. One of the things for me that really made my eyebrows, what's left of them, go up was going out there to the location. You see it in the film. There are tree stumps in that very immediate area left from that time. And you see that the direction of the event, that the lines, that mark the years of a tree's growth are distended in the direction and very distinctly larger than the ones in the back of the tree. It's one of a number of pieces of actual physical evidence that come together with a number of expert testimonies in terms of the psychology, the way that the media works. And in fact, one of the actors in the film who I thought really made it worthwhile was the late, great James Garner, who played Sheriff Gillespie, who was the law enforcement officer overseeing this. And when Jennifer and co-producer Bob Terrio, who was the man behind the camera, did the actual interview footage with Sheriff Gillespie, who by then was well into his 80s and retired, at a break, Jennifer asked him if he actually took Travis's account seriously. And Gillespie said, oh, yes, I was sure he was telling the truth, which caused a double take, understandably. And the following question, obviously, was, why did you feel that way? He said, you have to understand. I'm a career law enforcement officer in a very conservative part of the country with a particularly macho culture. I could never go on record with this, certainly at the time. But I had had a very profound incident very shortly before that. And he described driving on a remote area in Arizona with, I believe it was his daughter-in-law in the car in front of him. Profoundly unambiguous UFO comes into the area and his daughter's car goes off the road. She's just so shocked. And he told Jennifer and Bob the full account off the record. And Jennifer said, would you consider putting this on the record? And he said, I will consider that. And he passed of natural causes several months later. So it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So my second UFO story now, because this is all tied in. I was speaking at a conference in Minnesota. We had to land in Fargo, North Dakota, which was the closest airport. And Travis was at that conference, which was really great. Cool to cool to see him again. So we're at the same conference, and it turns out the speakers have to catch certain rides. You know how it goes, like depending on when your plane's leaving. Now Fargo's like an hour and a half. If you go to the middle of nowhere and make the left and keep going, if you don't lose hope, you will find a city. So it's the last night of the conference, and it turns out there's only two of us that have to leave the casino, hotel, convention center at about 2:30 in the morning to catch
you and Travis.
It's me and Travis, right? So when faced with these perplexing situations as a professional speaker, I have two choices. You know, like you're busy till like 9, 10 o'clock at night at these things, and I got to leave at 2:30 in the morning. And I said, well, I think the responsible thing to do is to just stay up and drink at the bar till they close.
Absolutely agreed.
Right. Then stumble up to my room, get my stuff, and then leave. It just made sense. So I don't regret doing that. That's what I did. It's 2:30 in the morning. There's me with my suitcase. There's Travis. I'm like, hey, I guess we're sharing a ride. This is great.
Yes.
And I did I mention I closed the bar, like last call, get out, right? Yeah. Anyway, so it's 2:30 turns to 3. And again, it's an hour and a half to Fargo, and we're like, where's our ride? You know, someone has to get us. And if you miss a flight out of a small airport like Fargo, it could be 3 months from now, right before like you get anywhere.
You're going to live there.
And so finally, the manager of the hotel says, get in my car. I'll just drive you.
Oh.
So wait, stay with me. So we start leaving, and as soon as we get out of this town, I don't even remember the name. It's the darkest I've ever seen, Peter. There's no lights. And I mean, you look way out on the prairie, right? It's not like there's a house 8 miles that way, a little light. There's no lights. And did I mention I closed the bar? I said that, right? That was said. So we're driving along at 3:30 in the morning, and the manager is driving about 90 miles an hour on the middle of the road, like straddling the line.
As one does.
I'm doing this because if there's any animals on the side of the road, we get the best shot not to hit them. And all I'm doing is I'm looking up at this starry sky, and I'm thinking, if I'm ever going to be abducted tonight,
with Travis Walton right here.
Travis Walton. And I knew what was going to happen. I said, they're coming for him. I'm collateral damage, right? I know they're not after me. I'm not special.
Whatever happens, nobody's going to believe it.
I'm in the way, right? I knew my position. And so suddenly I'm like, Travis, you okay? He's like, yeah, man, I just hope we make the flight, and I'm looking out the window and I'm looking at the stars and stuff. And, I said I closed the bar. I established that. So suddenly I look out on the horizon and there's these lights, right? And I'm like, Travis, dude, are you seeing this? And he leans forward. He's in the back seat and he's like, yeah, I see that. And that's when the driver goes, guys, that's Fargo. We're getting close. We screech to a halt in front of the airport. Right? Travis and I tumble out, race through security. We both make our flight, and I was not abducted. But I was sure, Peter, that was my night. Just didn't happen.
That is awesome. And all you have to do is see the film Fargo to know you were close to the paranormal there.
That was my Travis Walton UFO story. And then this is a great question. Did I fly in a Cessna? No, it was a real proper plane with everything. But all good. Yeah, that was a fun experience. Brian has another question for us. Look, there's a good one. Okay, Betty and Barney Hill. He wants to know, that's a pretty famous case up here in New England, of course. Very well documented, but he wants to know specifically about Betty's claim that she had a star map. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I do. And Brian, thank you for that terrific question. The Hill case is as famous and as well documented an abduction case as we have in the literature. It happened in 1961. A couple in New Hampshire returning from a holiday. The first people in the world of UFOs to undergo regressive hypnosis with a remarkably respected clinician, Dr. Simon, had kind of pioneered regressive hypnotic work to work with traumatized World War II veterans. I researched the case extensively, as many of us in the field do. I was lucky enough to make good friends and close colleagues with Kathleen Marden, who is the head of abduction studies for MUFON, and certainly is respected an authority on the subject.
Their niece,
as
right?
Anyone is. And Kathy's aunt and uncle were Betty and Barney.
Right. Okay, yeah.
And I've walked the walk with her. I've visited all the locations. I've seen the evidence. It's an incredibly important case, but to the star map, Betty remembered on the craft being shown a three-dimensional map of the relationship of where they came from to where we are, and remembered it well enough, as you do sometimes, and can recreate in a regressive hypnotic session the details, and drew it. An associate of Stanton Friedman's, who basically made that association between the two of them, named Marjorie Fish, constructed it three-dimensionally. And it was later established that it was a very real planetary location, and its location in reference to the Earth was completely accurate in that map. Another piece of actual scientific, although almost science fiction sounding, but very well grounded information that we have to verify the reality of the Hills experience. Again, Brian, very important question.
Yeah.
I think that case is one of the finest and most waterproof in the history of UFO studies, and we'll always refer people to it. Anybody interested in it, there's a terrific piece, a terrific book called Interrupted Journey that is as fine a piece of reporting on the subject as anybody has ever written. And it was written by John. I could grab the book off the shelf.
Google it, everyone. Google it.
Yeah, Interrupted Journey. I'm embarrassed to say it's the
Someone will
Scots.
comment
I'm
any
sure it
second
is.
with the author. Watch, this is a magical thing. It happens. So one other point about that case. So I love that case too. I'm a New England guy. I mean, I've looked into it as well. And here's what I say to people that say it's all bunk or whatever. If you go up Route 3 in New Hampshire, there is a sign, a beautiful state sign.
That's right.
That says right, and here's my point. The point, and I have a selfie next to that sign. I got pictures of it. 8 Ways to Sunday.
Yeah.
The point is that it says right here the UFO incident. The
state of New Hampshire backs that claim.
This was not like some Yahoo that put it up on like a piece of poster board. This is a beautiful metal sign that's one of the state of New Hampshire significant historic spot signs.
Exactly.
And I was like, ooh, taxpayers paid for that,
yeah.
right? Although you don't pay tax in New Hampshire, so I don't know. Maybe they did something, right? but it was one of those things where you're just like, wow. I mean, that's let that sink in. The state put up that sign.
It's true. I think that the governor of New Hampshire at the time, I forget his name, did something that was most appropriate and courageous considering what there still is of the ridicule factor. And
there you go.
It's a very important precedent that I hope we see more of as people lighten the hell up about the reality of this subject.
Yeah, John Fuller. I told you someone would help.
Exactly.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, so tell me about this new project you're working on. We're gonna set up this clip. I got a clip. We're gonna show this 30-second trailer, but set it up for us. What you're working on now?
Well, it's done. It's a subject that I had an interest in for over 30 years and kept coming and going from. Adding to my database when the world went digital, I was able to access more information. It's essentially the story of a very decent American who in his time was the second most powerful man in the United States, right next to Harry Truman. He was our first Secretary of Defense, James Vincent Forrestal, a name that every American should know, but very few do. I was intrigued by his kind of almost Horatio Alger climb from small town boy in upstate New York to Wall Street tycoon, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and then at the end of the war, Truman asked him to dismantle the old War Department that had been in place since the Revolution and create an entity that became known as the Department of Defense. He was nominated as the first Secretary of Defense. It was approved by acclamation, not a dissenting vote in the House or the Senate. Can you imagine that today?
No.
And he assumed the position in September of 1947, a scant maybe 10 weeks after something crashed in the plains outside of a then small town in New Mexico called Roswell. Everything ended up on his desk because of a number of character aspects to him, a sense of extraordinary devotion to his country and to the president, ultimately a feeling that he had let them down because he wasn't able to add to the minimal knowledge that we had about the subject, History tells us that James Vincent Forrestal committed suicide after a profoundly public nervous breakdown. Only minutes in terms of the way it manifested itself publicly after he stepped down and the second Secretary of Defense came over. There were problems for me in the so-called suicide. And as an investigative writer, I began to dig into it. And the documentary is about James Forrestal, his life, his climb to this extraordinary position in the American government, what a decent and honorable man he was, and then about his death, which was not suicide, but murder.
Nice.
I
Can we
put
see the
together,
clip?
Yeah.
Let's see the clip. We'll talk about it after. Hold on. Here we go. Whoops. Love a good conspiracy. Looks good. Looks slick. Look at you.
Well, it's actually, we're all fairly sophisticated viewers at this point. This is very basic. It's me, a green screen, 150 images, several film clips, a low-key, kind of old-fashioned soundtrack, and me basically looking into a teleprompter and telling you a story. On the surface, one could almost see it shown in a high school classroom or for a group of Kiwanis or in a local library or something. But I have to say, it's probably the most subversive project I've ever gotten myself involved in. It is calculated to bring in an audience. And by the time they're interested enough to stay with the story, which is well into the story, then bring in the aspect of something called UFOs and the cover-up thereof. It is available as a DVD right now. If you go to my executive producer Jennifer Stein's website, which is On Wings, WINGS.com. You can also order the Travis Walton documentary there. It will be available in downloadable form soon, but it isn't quite yet. I'm very proud of it for what it is. Overall, Jeff, I see my role in UFO studies as an educator. My focus has not been on them as much as on us and how we human beings deal with this subject. For me, the big challenge that I've assigned myself over the decades is get understandably doubting, intelligent people, whether they have PhDs or didn't graduate high school, but they've been informed as their parents and sometimes grandparents were that the subject is nonsense, and if you take it seriously, people can make fun of you. To get them into the foyer, so to say.
Sure.
And clear the air enough that they can understand that some UFOs are truly anomalous. As the great Stanton T. Friedman said, and boy, some of his aphorisms, I remember them word for word. The question is not, are UFOs intelligent machines, advanced machines from intelligent cultures, manned by intelligence from other places? That's a big paraphrase. The question is, has one ever been? And the answer to that is an overwhelming yes. Another one of my favorites of Stan, to digress for 10 seconds, is don't bother me with the facts. My mind is already made up. I obviously have colleagues who deal in much more exotic material, breaking cases. For me, I consider myself a 101 kind of person. Get them into understanding that this is damn serious and the implications for humanity are marked. And we should be taking it seriously because sooner or later it will probably hit the fan, and a little preparation wouldn't hurt.
So, okay, and this brings up a question I've asked you before, but I'm curious to see if your perspective has changed, and some of these folks might be meeting you for the first time. So I believe in my heart of hearts to think we're the only life in the universe would mean our universe is so horribly inefficient, and nature has proved itself really efficient over and over and over again. So that doesn't make any sense to me. Of course, then can they get here? And if they could get here, why would they come here? Why would they stay? We have coronavirus. We do have the best pizza in the galaxy. That's a fact. Like, everyone knows that. So here's my question, and I've asked you before: if you're in charge of the world, Peter, you have all the facts, like they've come to you and said, yeah, okay, yeah, we've covered it up, here's all the pictures, the photos, the videos, it's overwhelmingly true, we know they're here, we know they've got technology so far advanced to us, there's no point even shooting at them, because forget it. Would you tell the public? Would you go on camera and say, okay, everybody, yes, they're here? Would you tell them or not?
I've had this debate with people and with myself for decades now.
Sure.
I think that Harry Truman could have done it. He was president at a time that the president could have gone on television, well, radio, of course,
yep,
and said, my fellow Americans, and by extension, citizens of the world, we are not alone, and blah, blah. Truman had the foresight to pull together a working group of a dozen of the best minds surrounding his administration in a number of understandable fields. I think what happened, though, is after a certain amount of time and asking their opinion, they, now ultimate insiders, all successful dead white guys, I'm dead now, in their various fields of endeavor, were now probably quite ego-driven to remain part of this inner cabal and advised Truman, no, we need to continue studying this. If one sees the origins of the national security state, the way you'd see a piece of sand in an oyster that gets calcified more and more to keep that piece of sand from irritating the tissues of the oyster, the origins of the national security state, which America most certainly is and has been since the end of World War II or just after, is not nuclear secrets and fear of losing them. It is a UFO cover-up. I think now, yeah, I might well do that, but I wrestle with myself about how to manage it. For 20 years or so now, there has been a disclosure movement that some of your viewers are aware of, and there are leading figures in that who are pushing for world governments to join together and basically admit that it's true. The lies and the deception, the story begins here in the United States. And there's a tiny problem. So let's say, oh, you're president of the United States, and this stuff lands on your desk. And if you want, well, what the hell, you can do it. Although you might want to coordinate it with other world leaders, religious leaders, leaders in industry, psychology, business, etc. But you could do it. How do you go about simply saying, we're not alone? I take responsibility for the fact that you've never been told the truth and you've always been lied to by our government. I'm sorry about that, but it changes now. How do you present that basic earth-shaking news to the great majority of people? Because let's face it, the great majority of people are not like you and I. They are not prepared for this. They do not take it seriously. It would be tremendously challenging to them. How do you present that basic information and then them not begin to Google certain things and start to freak out about, wait a minute, what's the story about this abduction phenomena and these hybrid beings and missing pregnancies and one thing I have been thinking about on and off since we entered those times before, remember the before times like 2 months ago? It was a world that was very different.
My hair was
back. When you could get together, we could have a drink in person. I've been thinking to myself, as long as I've been thinking about what would be the implications of this announcement going out and people taking it seriously, that one thing I never really considered was, wait a minute, we'd be in a situation where basically for a serious period of time, just about everybody in the world would be thinking the same thing at the same time. What would that be like?
Whoa.
Well, welcome to that world.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and for me, there are some very serious lessons to be learned and examined from just that and what we are going through right now, with an application to how would that work out for the citizens of the world. My major concerns and interests for years, well, they mutated from who are they, what do they look like, why are they here, where do they come from, to I'm a humanist. And what's the impact of this subject on people? How can we begin to better educate them, to build a critical mass in world culture? I think of it in terms that go back to my years working in off-Broadway theater management, where you'd have a great off-Broadway play going on in my theater company, the Mirror Rep, one I was privileged to work with for so many years. Always revivals of plays that were very well received in their time. If you had a comedy up, say from 1920, it was still genuinely funny. Funny enough that it was a full house, people would be laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. And that's quite a wonderful sound. If you had maybe 37 people in a house with 210 seats, there'd be a self-consciousness. You needed a certain amount of people to get that tipping point. And that's the way it is in popular culture in the world as well, and human psychology. For me, the key to it is keep doing what I'm doing and hope that other people do the same thing. But we're still a long way off from that. So that's kind of a roundabout sort of answer to a very good question.
No, and I appreciate it, and I've thought about it as well, and I've said no, I wouldn't tell, and I think I was going to give a really thought out answer, but we got a comment from Sandra that I think sums it up even better than I could. Maybe not such a good idea. There's more Randy Quays than Jeff Goldblums.
Thank you, Sandra.
Like, you nailed it.
I love you. That's great. That's great.
So succinct. That could have been a tweet. Like,
yeah, and any serious moviegoer will appreciate that. Well done, Sandra.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's the challenge, right? But I know as a boy raised Catholic, the Catholic Church came out years ago and said, hey, if there is extraterrestrial life, it negates nothing in the Bible, yada, yada, yada. Which, I mean, that was, I think that was huge.
It was major.
Huge,
possibly the most repressive, organized religion, well, certainly up there. But in terms of controlling, thinking of followers,
right.
I found that a remarkable breath of fresh air, which I'm still kind of wrapping my head around, even though we were first aware of this more than 20 years ago. The late, great Cardinal Balducci, who was an emissary directly of the Vatican, who even spoke at some UFO conferences, besides doing a fair number of television, pulled no punches on this subject. The church is aware of this. And for me, growing up in the Reformed Jewish tradition, but in an archdiocese. My county was just that, and I grew up with a lot of Catholic friends and some attempt to understand the mysteries of the Holy Trinity and
complicated.
Yeah, very complicated.
Yeah.
All that stuff. I won't even go into detail. That
go ahead.
One fact about Catholicism is the confessional. And whether or not you're a sophisticated person living in a big city or somebody with no formal education growing up in a third world country, if you are Catholic, your parish priest may be the person that is the only person that hears about this crazy thing that happened to you that you can't reconcile, that might have been the devil or whatever. And that information has historically been passed along. That's theoretical, but I think it probably is true. And that at a certain point, the church hierarchy realized that this was real. And they could deny it or rationalize it as the minions of Satan, as certain people do, and that it's all explainable in conventional terms. But I think it's one of the most marvelous things the Roman Catholic Church has ever done.
My suspicion when it went down, I remember thinking, like, you know what? Someone at NASA called them and said, we found a bug. We found a bug on Mars, right? That's all you got to find. You just need a little creepy crawly bug, a microscopic organism and say, yeah, no, there's life over there, something. It doesn't have to be intelligent. It just
You
has
should
to.
know about it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I wonder. I was like, wow, I wonder if any minute NASA's going to be like, all right, here's the bug that the rover caught running by.
Na- no, part of the problem with America disclosing, which it will never do willingly, it's not going to happen, folks, is that whomever the leadership is, if hypothetically a president of the United States, doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter what their politics is, were to consider doing it, they would have to consider that everybody in the little club that they're now a member of, since and including Harry S. Truman, is an unindicted co-conspirator in the biggest cover-up of all time. And they're touchy about that. Presidential people are not quite like us, like the rich.
Right.
They think in different terms. And one of the things that they're thinking that you and I are probably not regularly thinking is, what will my legacy be in terms of the history of the world? And they got a good job. They're going to get a lot of work after they're done if they want.
Sure.
They're never going to have to pick up the check at dinner if they don't want. Sign autographs, whatever. You don't want to rock that boat. And so it is human nature translating into political policy.
Yeah, and that's the way it goes. Peter, I'm almost. How are you feeling? You've had a few sips?
Yeah, just fine. And yeah, thank you for having me have an alcoholic beverage a little earlier than I usually do.
Well, no, it's my pleasure. It's, we do this because we need to connect. I was listening to a wonderful podcast today, Hidden Brain, which I can't recommend
I
enough.
love that podcast. I listen to it every week.
It's great. So it was
NPR.
about connecting and how the lack of connection could be an interesting, subpart of so many ailments, right? You turn to alcoholism, you turn to horrible thoughts because you're not connecting. And so I appreciate in this era of being separated that we are able to connect, at least in this way, have a drink, feel a little bit social, a little bit normal, right? Even if it's for an hour, it's something, and people had some drinks with us, and really appreciate you guys. I know there's so many questions we didn't get to. Maybe we'll do this again. I mean,
I'd like to.
Yeah.
You'll be paying me just as much for a reappearance?
I'll double it. Well, triple
I'm
it.
at your service then. And I think this is a brilliant idea for a show. You are one of my favorite people in the world. And I absolutely look forward to the next time that we can get together in corporeal three-dimensional terms.
Yes, for sure. And thank you, Peter. It was fun. It's been really therapeutic for me to do these because I miss my friends, and it's helping me reconnect and feel just a little bit better during these very weird times.
Yeah, amen to that, brother.
Yeah, and so I'm grateful that people are watching, and please tell us. So for everyone to know, Friday night is going to be party nights. Friday nights, they've sort of evolved into that anyway. This Friday night, we're going to have Dave Schrader from Darkness Radio, who's been my drinking buddy twice before on these things now. Erin Ryder from Destination Truth is going to join us. She's also producing television shows. She's in LA. Dave's in Minneapolis. And we got a musical guest, Slamabama from Alabama, is going to be joining us. So it's just going to be pretty much a raucous free-for-all party on Friday night.
Right.
And then I've sort of fallen into this routine of Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I've got a radio host in South Africa, a talk host that's going to talk to me about what's going on down there. And I'm just going to keep bringing in interesting people from all facets. And we're going to keep talking, and we're going to keep sharing drinks. And I appreciate it. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure.
Course, if you'd like to tip your bartender, Venmo tips are accepted. I've been appreciative of those. If you want to keep this thing going, it's been helping a lot, especially during these unemployed times. So thank you all. And thanks for being here, Peter. Thanks for having drinks. I'm glad you drank early with me. Cheers.
Me too, brother.
All right. And on that note, I wish you all good health and take it easy.